Welcome to Driving the Cbus. I'm your host, Scott McComb. I'm chairman and CEO of a little community bank in Columbus, Ohio called Heartland Bank. My travels really exposed me to some very interesting people, entrepreneurs that are world-class people in their own right, but run businesses that are up and coming in the 13th largest city in the country, which is Columbus. Each one of them is also unique in their own way. Their upbringing is different. Their family life might be different. But ultimately, the one thing that holds us all together as entrepreneurs is hard work and dedication and our love of our people. So that's what we try to do here on the podcast, is figure out what makes these entrepreneurs tick, what makes these areas of Columbus what they are, and how Columbus really became the place that it is today. Today on the show, we have a very special person that's really made a big impact on the city of Columbus and the surrounding area, and that's Mr. Brent Crawford. He's principal and founder of the Crawford Hoying companies. He guided the vision of the company. He's been guiding it since 1994, in which he's grown his single investment property in one of the largest real estate firms in Columbus, Ohio. Personally oversees many of the aspects of the business, including raising private equity for specific investments, into income-producing properties, securing debt financing, managing the relationships with equity investors, monitoring new acquisitions, ground-up development, and all the other things that come with running a company of your own. Brent has spoken at many events as a guest speaker, covering topics such as current real estate trends, multifamily markets, and development growth here in Central Ohio. In addition, he taught property management and real estate trends at the Fisher College of Business at the Ohio State University, and regularly returns as a guest speaker. He serves on the boards of Sophisticated Systems, the Ohio State Sports Medicine Center, as well as the Center for Real Estate at the Ohio State University. He's also a current member of the Columbus Partnership, a 1995 graduate of OSU, holding a bachelor's degree in communications. He resides in Dublin, Ohio with his wife, Liz, and their 2 children. Welcome to the program, Mr. Brent Crawford.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Wonderful. Brent, that's a mouthful, all the different, the bio I was just reading, and all the different things you've accomplished here in Central Ohio. And obviously it's a household name here now, you and your company and your partners. Tell me, how did you, in 1995, you majored in communications. How did you get into development?
Yeah, so it is a different story. Not like a lot of the other development companies in Columbus who are second generation, third generation, fourth generation. So we are truly a first generation company, and started as they probably did, which is really with a single property, which I purchased in college. And it really started because my landlord at the time had bought a few homes on the same street, and I said, wow, this is really interesting. I'm kind of fascinated by this. And he asked if I would do some drywall work and some landscaping work for him. And I found it interesting, and I did, and was watching him that first year, and I thought, I can do this. And so I went back to my parents. This would have been my second sophomore year, as I say, and said to my parents, I'm interested in buying a home. I could have my friends move in with me. I can live for free, and I think I can make some money. I really want to do this, but my parents didn't have any money. And so I went to my girlfriend's grandmother, who's now my wife, and I borrowed $1,500 to buy the very first property. Moved my buddies in, and at that time I was making $500 a month, which I thought was a fortune to live off of, but very quickly.
Well, it was back then.
Yeah,
right?
It was. It was, and honestly, it was all the money I needed to do what I needed to do, but at the same time, I wasn't spending it. I immediately caught the bug and said, this is what I want to do. So I saved the money up to buy another property as quickly as I could do, and actually got my wife, girlfriend at the time, she bought the house across the street from me and did the exact same thing, and so we were pooling our money together at that point, and 2 led to 3. And so forth. But like anything, there's always, when people say they're self-made, I don't really believe in that statement. There's always somebody along the way that helps you out. I mean, it takes initiative and drive to do it, but the reality is there's people in your life that have an impact. And I went back to my high school, again, after my sophomore year. And
where'd you go to high school?
Batavia High School down near Cincinnati,
Batavia,
a small school. I think I had about 45 kids in my graduating class, essentially a small farm community. and went back to see my history teacher, Gary Schroff, who was one of the most influential people in my life. And one of those kinds of guys, when I was a freshman, you didn't like him because he was so hard on you. By the time you were a senior, you thought that's the most important person I've ever met. And so I went back to see him, told him what I was doing, and he said, "Wow, that's fantastic. I actually own some real estate as well." And I was, to be honest, shocked at the time because he was famous for driving sort of junky cars, and I knew he lived in a very, very tiny house. But as it turns out, he was, relatively wealthy and had been saving his money. And he said, "Well, I'd be interested in doing a deal with you if you want to do it." And I'd never contemplated really other people's money in the sense from an investment perspective. I'd borrowed that initial $1,500, which I paid back. But so I said, great. And I came up with the idea, which is a common model, really. I said, well, how about if you put all the money in and I do all the work, and we split the profits 50-50. And that was the start of it. I found a house for $58,000, 2228 Indianola Avenue on campus, and we purchased that. But a quick side note of something that was amazing out of that from a trust perspective is this was sort of pre-computer, and the title company called and said, "Hey, there's been a mess up on the paperwork. We forgot to include Gary Schroff in that paperwork, and there's going to be a little bit of a delay." So I called Gary and told him, he said, "No, don't worry about it. Just put it in your name. It's no problem." And then he mailed me a $58,000 check and to me personally.
Wow.
And I put the house in my name. And this was just my history teacher. And that was the start of a great relationship. We sold that house and did very well on it, and he ended up doing some future investing.
How's Gary? Gary's still around?
Gary's still around, yep. I see him not as much as I'd like to, but once or twice a year he comes up to Ohio State games, and we catch up then. So
Gotcha.
He's had a huge impact on me.
You guys still do some business together, do you?
We do. Yeah, we do. Our business is certainly transitioned like any business does, and it started with really just meeting people, and Gary was certainly one of them. And I had, at the same time, because I needed insurance, I was working at Nationwide at the time while going to school full time, and I essentially had a full time job at Nationwide. And then at this point, probably had 7 or 8 properties on campus that I was taking care of, and met a lady sitting next to me who didn't need to be working, but was working because she wanted to. And turns out, she kept asking what I was doing, and she said, "If I gave you a couple $100,000, what could you do with it?" And that led to that relationship. And then over time and doing deals, you meet owners, investors, people in the brokerage business. And I met a couple individuals who go to the next level. When I first got the $100,000 investment, I thought it was $50 million. And then the first $500,000. And then I had a guy say, "Hey, can I give you a couple $1 million? And what could you do with it?" And I remember he handed me a check in the McDonald's parking lot, to me personally, for $2 million. And I thought, these people are crazy. This was the early days, really, and from a trust perspective, and something I certainly would advise other people to do. But I developed relationships with various people, and that guy in particular has invested many millions with us since then. So it started with really just one, and that experience at Ohio State. And I think when you start in the business like I did, you buy existing buildings, but you're always kind of dreaming of what's possible. When you see buildings being built, but not really know how does that process happen. And so it took me 15 years to get to that point where we were ready to really get in the development business. And a lot of it has to do with development's the most risky portion of real estate.
Oh, exactly.
You got to understand all disciplines of the real estate business, because really if you miss on one of them and you don't know it, that's where people get hurt. And so we really took our time to make sure we understood it.
Now, you didn't start off building places like Bridge Park, right? I mean, so we started off on Indianola Avenue. We started off with, where was the first house that you got with your buddies, or you had your buddies move in?
Yeah, first one was 2182 Indiana Avenue.
Indiana, yeah.
Yep, and then my wife bought 2187 Indiana Avenue, and then we bought 2230 Indiana Avenue. And so I was just buying all around North Campus at Ohio State.
Gotcha. I used to live on Indiana Avenue,
really?
Believe it or not. Yeah, back in the day. I forget the address, but it was a block off in Indianola, Indiana Avenue,
exactly.
North Campus. Yeah,
it was a great
That's
place.
Where I met my wife, actually. Met my wife, Amy, when I was living in that house.
Yeah, and we stayed there after we got married as well for a year or two until we.
Yeah, it's a neat community there. Of course, bleeds into Clintonville and such.
It does, yeah.
Now, you talked about leverage, obviously, in development. You have to have that element of trust that you've just emulated there, and it can really get you sideways if you don't have that. And y'all remember also, developers have a reputation that lives with you forever, right? So your relationship with your history teacher is probably something that you maybe that, or is that where you learned? Tell me a little bit about how you learned your level of trust and the speed of trust and how you use that in your business.
Sure. I think for us in our company's success, we pretty much bring it down to relationships we have with each other in our company, and then with our partners, our investors, our lenders. Those are all crucial parts, and we take tremendous pride in that. And from a trust perspective, both us trusting the guy next to me in the office, that he's doing what he's supposed to be doing, that he's doing it the right way, an ethical way, and I think our investors feel the same about it. They know, it's always about what do you do when no one's looking. And I always sort of take it back, and where our relationships really grew, both internally and externally, was through the downturn. So it's easy to be successful when things are hot. It's what do you do when things go real south?
And how do you act?
And how do you respond? And for us, when 2008 through 2012 happened, the reality is we barely made it. It was an extremely challenging time. But I tell everybody, and I still say to this day, the best thing that ever happened to us. I'm glad it happened. I don't want to ever do it again. But the lessons we learned, both in how to run a business, operationally, because we were so focused on top-line revenue at the time because everything was so hunky-dory, that what kind of happened in the middle wasn't as important. But really virtually overnight, within a matter of 24, 48 hours, it was gone. When Bear Stearns collapsed, all transactions essentially stopped for us. And so we were left with our operating companies, and then we had to really dig in and understand what we were doing in order to stay afloat. And as part of that, we just became really close with a lot of people in our company, a lot of the key principals. Everybody had to dig in and put their arms around each other and say, we can do this. And we had to take it one day at a time. And the same thing with our investors and partners. The people that stood by us during that time frame, we made certain to take care of them during that time frame. So it was important to Bob and I to even though we sacrificed a lot, both personally and financially, in order to make sure nobody else suffered, it was the best decision we ever made, because as soon as the market started to turn and we were on solid footing, those investors and partners came back tenfold. So if somebody had a couple $1 million with us, it's not unusual for some of those people to have $20 or $30 million with us now. And so those relationships that you derive from difficult times are the most important. And the same thing with our lending partners. We had a lot of lending partners at the time who stood by us, and we'll never forget those individuals. And the reality is there were lending partners that didn't, not just us, right? But lots of developers, lots of real estate people. There was, I won't name names, but some that weren't so kind to their partners. Right. And I wouldn't borrow from them if there was no money left on earth. It's just, but because it's a relationship business for us. And
it is. And
so, relationships, there's really nothing more important to us than the relationships of the people we work with. And that's the fun of it, is we don't talk about money a lot in our company. Really what we're talking about is doing great things with great people and you get great results, not focused on money from day one. If you just do those first few things, you're going to be successful. And I think where people get caught up in just staring immediately, day one, first thing, looking at this bottom line, forgetting about, what if you're not doing great things? At the end of the day, you may not. We've yet to do a deal in my mind that we've done something great for the community and done it with great partners. So you've got honest, ethical people involved across the board. It's worked every time.
Now, the financial disaster, just to put the caps on that, you guys had to work with your lenders. You didn't just bail on everybody, right? You worked it out. You said, hey, here's the available cash flow. Yep. This is what we can do. Let's work a deal.
It's communication, I think, is one of the things that we learned during that time frame. A lot of the people I know, and I had a lot of friends, and I mean a lot of friends that went under. Very successful people that went bankrupt, starting all over. Close friends of mine, family members of mine who were in the business had gone down. I think one of the reasons that we didn't, one is we had strong relationships from the beginning, and if you have strong relationships and people have faith in you, sometimes they're willing to extend a little further to help a little more.
Yeah.
And communication was the key. So I was very actively calling almost on a weekly basis to update. Here's the status. Here's what's going on. This particular loan's due next month. we paid current on everything. That was the critical thing. While it was very painful to do, we wanted to make sure we always paid current. There might have been, as we call, and Scott knows well, maturity defaults where the loans had come due, but of course there was nowhere to go get a new loan.
Right.
So we had to work with our lenders to say, hey, can you just hold steady here for 6 months? Let me work through this scenario, and we did, and we worked through it systematically one at a time until they were all taken care of. But we used that knowledge that we gained through that time to also have vision for what might be coming and to be prepared and to better understand the risks that are involved. And we want to make sure, and we did to some extent, but we want to make sure the next downturn comes, we want to take advantage of the downturn and be ready for it. Because the reality is, about the most money that's ever been made in the history of the United States was made between 2008 and 2012. Yes, a lot was lost, but fortunes were
not
made.
Not nearly as much that was made. That's correct.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we worked with people like yourself. We worked with you during that
absolutely.
time frame, and there's a marked difference between the people that decided to communicate and make hay with what you have versus throwing the keys at you. I had some guys, like yourself, that they would want to communicate. We constantly get in updates. We're going to work on this together. Mm-hmm. We're all in this together. And then I had others that just said, well, give me this or I'm going to throw the keys at you. Right. And I just said, okay, well, I'm going to catch the keys. And that's where we were able to just turn those portfolios, turn around. It's just a matter of time for that heals itself. But that was a devastating thing here for not only Columbus, but for the nation and the world. Built on the fact that real estate will always, everyone has a right to own a home, which is not true.
Nope.
And that real estate will always increase in value,
Right.
So tell me about, you guys have a unique makeup of the ownership of your company and your partners, and you've added some people, in the last several years as well. Tell me how you, first of all, what that relationship is and who are the players, and then how has that changed as the company has metamorphosized over time?
So Bob Hoying is my 50-50 partner, essentially, in Crawford Hoying. And we met in 98 randomly on a golf course is how we were put together. He was in his first year in the NFL, and I was doing my real estate thing, and we randomly got paired together one day. I went out to play by myself, and so did he. And I remember the guy in the clubhouse said, hey, there's no availability. There's somebody out there. And I don't like to play with strangers. I never have. But I really wanted to play. I remember it was 75 and sunny. It was a gorgeous day. So I'm like, okay, I'll go out and play. And he happened to be standing on the tee box. And I graduated the same year he did. I was a massive Ohio State football fan, a huge Bob Hoying fan. And so we hit it off right away. And by the end of the round, he was asking what I did. I never asked what he did, even though I knew, right? And he knew that I knew. But it's just something they talk football all the time. So I made sure I never even brought it up. And he would ask him what I was doing and said he had interest in the business. And I think that night he asked if we wanted to have dinner. And relationship had started that way, and he was very smart in that he knows not everybody plays forever, and you're eventually going to have to do something else. And so he wanted to get into the real estate business, so he would come back every summer essentially and learn the real estate business while still being in the NFL. So he got his license during the off season, and just really coming in and learning day to day about what is real estate, just the basics to start, and pro formas and understanding. Buying and selling and all those things that are involved. And so he was my first big partner. I had employees at the time, certainly, but I saw a good opportunity, certainly from a name recognition on his part for the business. Not that it was super important to me, but we got along well, and I thought he'd be a good asset to the company.
Well, not to mention his upbringing and, his father, Vern, runs their own construction company, and so they know, that whole side of the business, which is an acumen. I mean, you know how to turn properties around, but I don't know that you knew a whole bunch about pouring concrete and turning screws.
Didn't know anything about it at
so
the time.
What a great addition, to the whole overall company.
For sure. And part of it, too, is his makeup in that he was a small town kid as well, Northwest Ohio, same principles and values that I sort of held relative to how you treat people. And I saw that pretty quickly, and so that was an important part to it. And after he came on, I think, again, like any business, transition happens. And I think one of the biggest things we've learned in the past really 6 or 7 years is the quality of individual that you hire. Not necessarily just skill set, but the quality of the human being. And really that's what we're looking for, especially from a culture perspective, is we're very particular about who we hire. So we often take a long time to hire people because they have to fit within our group and our company and how we interact with each other and the trust. And part of it's we're a lighthearted group. We want to have fun doing what we're doing. but we also want to work with people that when those people go out into public, that they're a great representation of our company. And people, really, we want to be known as great people. That's really first and foremost, because I think if you have that relationship, people want to do business with you, and that's really what it's led to. And so, like I said, the last 6 or 7 years, we've hired dozens of people in the corporate office, but a key 10 or 12 people, and also realizing that it's worth paying for great talent. It took me a long time to realize that you got a candidate that's $100,000 or a candidate that's $200,000. You think, well, it's an extra $100,000, but we've pretty much found
they're not all made the same.
No,
right?
And they pay for themselves virtually the moment they walk in the door. And so we've really just put together what we think is best in class team. That really understands the full gamut of development. We have somebody really who's an expert in virtually every part of the business, and sometimes multiple people. And a lot of the people are also, they're experts really in 3 or 4 different areas. Nelson Yoder, who's one of is our development partner in that part of the business equally with Bob and I. We always say sort of a development genius. He's really just absolutely incredible at what he does. And we've had a lot of those types of people, and certainly surrounding yourself with people smarter than yourself is the smartest thing you can do, and that's really what we've tried to do. Is really the key executive team are just a lot of very smart, fantastic people.
So the company has metamorphosized over the last, I guess it's been 25 years.
Yeah, 25-year anniversary just 2 weeks ago.
Oh, congratulations! That's awesome. You started off doing the smaller projects, individual homes, really, right?
Yes.
And first, we start the $1,500 loan, right?
Yeah.
Or from your girlfriend's grandmother.
Yes.
And now you've turned it into this very, very large company that has projects, frankly, all over the state. Do you do stuff outside the state now, or
we do general contracting? So when you made mention of Vern Hoying, Bob's father, we purchased that construction company about 15 years ago. And one of the best moves we did in that construction business is in Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, for the most part, we're building in. But from a development business,
bracket builders,
right? Correct. But development-wise, for the most part, Central Ohio is the majority of our development. We have a very large project going in downtown Dayton, which we absolutely love. We're just it's been an incredible thing for us. And the success, I think, of what we've been doing, of course, like any business, has led to other opportunities. And so we have some really big announcements coming that we haven't announced yet. We're very excited about in this market. And then we're being contacted, I would say it's pretty much every day, but a lot of times by municipalities. So they've seen what we've done for Dublin or Upper Arlington, and they're calling and saying, hey, would you come to our market to do something similar?
Right. Well, everybody in Ohio, anyway, in these Ohio markets, they're revitalizing distraught areas like, Dayton is kind of a rebuild, right?
Yes.
And I know the people out there really appreciate their relationship with you guys, because no one else was really coming in and doing anything. Right. And so, but now they are, because they see what you're doing and what you've done out there. So it's kind of contagious, right?
Yeah.
When you get quality projects.
Well, I'm proud of that for sure for Dayton, because we truly were the first ones. When we got down there, there was nothing happening. I mean, every news story was a negative news story. It's this business leaving that business, and it was just truly distraught. But we also understood that there is always some rebirth, and there was enough successful pieces of downtown Dayton. One, we had a mayor, Nan Whaley, who understood what it meant to try to revitalize the downtown area and the steps it was going to require. And so when we met with them initially, and sort of the package they had to put together, there was the only way from a financial perspective, because there was risk there on our end. But we thought, hey, with the fact that there's really been no new housing for 30 years, doesn't mean people aren't living here, but they just haven't ever built it because they were afraid. And we said, listen,
I'm willing to take risk.
To take risk. And there is risk in it. And we believe it's measured risk, because you look at the components that are involved in a development deal. And one of them is, what is the city's participation? What is their invested interest? Not just monetarily. Do they want it? And in this case, Dayton really wanted it, and they were willing to invest monetarily in it. And so we knew from a process and procedure that it was going to be somebody working hand in hand with us to get it done. And really, honestly, it's the most successful project we've ever been involved with. So our Water Street project surrounding the baseball stadium down there, Fifth Third Field, we did our first 215 apartments, which even our lender at the time was like, you sure you want to do that many? It seems like, and I said, well, you got to have enough density for it to make sense. We were essentially 100% leased at certificate of occupancy on 215 apartments. I've never heard of that at any development anywhere in the state of Ohio before.
That's awesome.
We did build another 60, same thing. We did another conversion of a 100-year-old warehouse building, which is one of our favorite projects we've ever done. 132 units essentially within a matter of a month after we open. It was full. And we're building another 120 right now that'll open this fall. And we've a few other big projects we're getting ready to start. We just did a Fairfield Inn hotel down there. Same thing, no new hotels in 30 years, and that was one. Same thing, everybody was like, ooh, this seems risky. It is the fastest, our hotel operator, who has roughly 60 hotels in the U.S., said it's the fastest lease-up of a hotel they've ever had. So it's essentially running at 100% at all times. And no one would have guessed downtown Dayton. Wow. So we're proud to be part of that.
You got UD down there. Yeah. There's companies moving in. I mean,
yes, especially now CareSource is really exploded.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, and what it's done is, and we encourage this. I tell people, there's certain people I tell, they're like, well, I would keep it a secret. I said, nah, we want everybody to know. Go and redevelop Dayton. There's plenty of opportunity for people. And the reality is, the better that the rest of the city comes up, I own other properties there.
Right,
I want it to keep rebounding. So let's see the whole city come up out of the ground and a rebirth. And there's virtually a new announcement every week now of something positive, new developments, new companies moving back downtown. And I look at it and compare it to Columbus. I say Columbus is, in the 6th or 7th inning of what we can be. They're still in the bottom of the half of the first, maybe early, top of the second inning down there as far as what's possible.
Now, not everybody, is on the gravy train, right? I mean, not everybody's on the bandwagon whenever you go to do some of those developments,
right?
And it takes time. I remember when you were amassing the ground in Dublin, for instance, and so here comes this project, and you guys were kind of on your own until, because you had to make some believers over the course of time. Of course, the city of Dublin now is a great partner.
Yeah.
But at the time, they were kind of a wait and see thing, right? I mean,
a little bit. They did have the same vision. I will say that, because their master plan called for something similar. But what their hesitation was like anybody was, this is a plan on a piece of paper, but you actually have to pull it off. And what we were proposing was large in scale.
Very large.
Unprecedented, really, in terms of the speed in which it's come out of the ground. And while I think other people, when I had friends even now that come up to me today, I was 100% sure that thing was going to fail. I was 100% certain of it. I mean, good friends of mine. And I said, I know you did. But we believed in it. And there were reasons. Some of them are micro for us, and that I live in Dublin. Bob lives in Dublin. Nelson lived in Dublin. A lot of our principals were there. Our office was headquartered there. We knew the wealth that was there. We knew the corporate headquarters. We knew the lack of housing was enormous. The lack of restaurants, hotels,
a nice hotel.
Yeah, it was all missing, and just the pieces and parts aligned. And the reality is, while one interesting thing about Bob is very conservative, and I've typically been very aggressive. And over the years, we've sort of both met in the middle. And obviously, the downturn will do that to someone. Although I don't believe we were being aggressive at all during the downturn. We got caught up like lots of people did. But we sort of met in the middle. But that was a risk. And at some point in your life, it depends on what your goals are, what you want to achieve, and maybe even how you're raised. Although I was raised very conservatively, so I can't say that, because neither of my parents ever took any risk in their entire life, really, to do anything. So, but it was just natural for me, and I thought this is a risk worth taking. And sometimes you got to put the chips in the table in order to win big, and that's kind of how we felt about it. But it was a measured risk. We had been, as we were acquiring land, we were reaching out to people, for example, Cameron Mitchell, and saying, Cameron, we're going to do this project. I think this would be huge for you. He's always wanted to be in Dublin, but there were no spots to go in Dublin for him, at least as he saw it and where he wanted to be and the type of restaurant. And we got early commitments from him on a couple of restaurants. And so these are things were happening behind the scenes really before we were getting too deep in. And once we saw how much interest there was, and of course we did a condo development that was one of the first projects, and we were essentially, people were we did our first presentation, bringing deposit checks up at the meeting. So we knew we were onto something right away. And I think it's like any business, but development specifically, you have to maintain momentum is critical. So I had a lot of developer friends said, why don't you just build 4 buildings and then wait and see? It just doesn't work like that. Imagine if we would have just had the 4 buildings and it would have been grass. What energy would there have been not knowing what's coming next? In order to attract tenants, a lot of times you have to be building, they have to know it's coming. Right, big office tenants. They're not going to wait for you to start construction. You have to start construction, so they know. So it was a risk certainly, but it's a measured risk, and we love difficult things. We take pride in it. It's a lot of fun for us, and so it's a very challenging project. a lot of things involved, right? There's a lot of coordination with the city, with the pedestrian bridge and the park, the financing aspects of that. There's private bonds, public bonds. There's a new community authority. There's a TIF. It just goes on. And what's great about that, though, is it makes barrier to entry very high to do business, not just in Dublin, but a lot of these types of projects. It's just very hard to pull off because the historical knowledge you have to have and the brain power in order to pull it off. And I'm not saying that's me. There's a lot of people in our office, again, that are just insane at these at these things. So putting those pieces together is a lot of fun.
Now, was your first TIF the one that we did in Upper Arlington?
Was
that your first? That was Upper Arlington's first as well.
Yeah.
And at that now that corridor is booming as well.
We're getting ready to start another. Well, we are started. Yeah, it's generally already started. The next lane 2, essentially, the next phase, which was another bond, a TIF that we did there as well.
Right. Yeah, that's a complicated thing, and of course those people don't dance with partners unless they know they can trust them as well. And they have a quality track record. Yeah. You're taking leaps of faith in the tens of millions of dollars realm. You got to know who you're dealing with.
Well, and one of the things that we've also realized over the past 20 plus years is the relationship piece, but it's the transparency piece. And it's where we've developed great relationships with these municipalities, and Upper Arlington being one of them is developers for sure have a reputation of it's either my way or the highway, right? We're going to develop this and you're going to give me what I want no matter what, but they hide the information in terms of how much do I really need. And I think cities, municipalities always feel like the developer's getting over on them. They're getting too much money and it's the big fat developer. We take the opposite side of that. This isn't all developers for sure, so I'm not bad-mouthing all of my friends out there because that's one great thing about this market here is developers, we're all friends, which is somewhat unusual.
And you have partnerships with most of them as well.
And we're partnering with some new ones coming up here. But is that we share our information openly with the municipalities. I mean, here are our full pro formas so they can see here's what we're making, and we share with them and say, in order for us to make this work, here's the gap that we need, and they can see it all. So they see our assumptions, they'll know that their market, and that way it gives them comfort that we're just asking for what is required in order to do it. And I think it's hard, especially a lot of times citizens don't understand, whether it be TIFs that are given or tax abatements. These things are absolutely 100% required. I know people get frustrated by them, but typically what most people don't understand, again, is the tax abatement is only on the improved, what you build. It's not on the existing. So the school boards are losing no money. They're just not. They're only, the abatement's only on what the new project's being built. Well, without it, the new project's never built. And then guess what? The tax abatement never expires, so they never get the money. In this case, it expires and they do get the money. And in today's world, the reality is it's just 100% required. The projects don't even come close to working without a TIF or tax abatement. It just doesn't work.
No, and it's not about it's also not about the just the property tax. I mean, you've got employment tax is really half the game for sure. Is bringing people there to live, work, play, to eat, entertain themselves, whatever. All that works together to fund, the world we live in.
And it was great for us to do lane 1 and have it be successful and them to get those numbers so they can reference back and say, hey, here was the economic benefit for the city by them doing this development. They're going to do the same thing. It's worth it us for supporting. The same thing with Dublin. The amount of revenue they've brought in now, whether it be bed tax coming in from the hotel, which the hotel I think finished was there's 54 AC Marriotts in North America. That was the number 1 financial performer last year in North America, just doing incredibly well. Well, the city's benefiting from that. Again, all the payroll tax that is coming in from there, all the residents living there now that are spending money in the city. So it can be a great thing. It's certainly well beyond property taxes, as you said.
Yeah, and heck, now you got Urban Meyer's going to open up a shop in there, which is great.
It is great.
What's it called? Is it Urban Meyer's Ale House?
Urban Meyer's Pine House. So it's really he's in partnership with Chris Corso, who's of course done a lot of successful restaurants here in Columbus. I know I read some of the comments online, which I should never do, but people are like, what does he know about running a restaurant? And is he going to be waiting table? Stuff. Just some of it funny, of course, but the reality is it's really Chris is the brains behind running the restaurant and the concept. And the Pine House is already a successful concept. Urban saw it as an opportunity, one, from a charity perspective. He loves his charity work and raising funds and attaching his name to that and being able to do all of his events there is a great way to do that. And it's just something that's always interested in him. And we talked at length about it, whether he should do it. And And really, it was who was the partner, and Chris has got a great reputation. And if it's Chris or Cameron and maybe one or two others, you'd do it. And otherwise, that's not something you want to venture into on your own.
No, the restaurant business is a very, very difficult business, just like developing. You got to know what you're doing
for sure
in these businesses in order to get to the next level. So you've got a wonderful career. I mean, you're not even 50 yet, right? So we just talked to your birthday. It was just a little bit ago. What are the plans? What does Brent going to do the next 10 years? What do you see yourself doing? In retirement, or is that even on your radar screen? I mean,
it's not. I always say I'll retire when I die, and I think part of it for me is if you're having fun doing what you're doing, I don't see a reason to retire. I absolutely love it. I love to go to work, and part of it again is going to do it with people I want to work with. Right, so a lot of the people in our office are great friends, and some people do it differently, and I'm fine with this. There's risks in it, meaning a lot of these people are my best friends that work in the office, and they're the people I vacation with, so I see them all day, and then we go on vacations, we hang out at night, we do stuff with our kids, and so I love that. I love that family aspect, and I just don't see retiring. I see continuing to mentor and bring along some of the younger people. We've got some incredibly talented younger team members that we just absolutely adore and think got bright futures. So I see more of a bigger picture. I'm getting involved in more boards, and Columbus Partnership for one, I'm very passionate about, and what that partnership can do for Columbus, I think is fantastic. So I want to do more of that. Somebody gave me some advice a couple years ago and basically said, you got to stop running a business and start owning a business. And so I have thought about it a little bit differently on a daily basis. So what am I really focused on? And thinking that task I used to do, not a good use of my time, right? And that's not a good use of my time, and really focusing on things that are a good use of my time. And part of it is even things like this, is spreading our brand and who we are as a company, and taking that instead of digging into looking at an individual item on a profit and loss statement, which I still do. I still think it's important for me to be in touch with all of the entities, so I still review all the financials every month, but there are tasks that I stepped away from. So I see staying very active. I see the company doing more of what we're doing, getting more opportunities. And again, we have some coming up that we're very excited about that I can't wait to get announced. I think are a bridge for us into the next phase of the company in terms of what our opportunities will be. And at the same time, my wife and I absolutely love to travel. It's our favorite thing. We just got back from Italy. We're getting ready to go to Morocco.
Nice.
We love to travel the world. So I definitely will continue to do that. That's for sure.
Well, Brent, I can't thank you enough for being on the program and for your contributions to the city. I mean, as you're one of the city's largest developers now. You came from nothing, built it up yourself, first generation business. You've really surrounded yourself with quality people. And that's how you build a culture of a company, and you're just proof in the pudding here of what good hard work and success and the speed of trust
for sure
can affect not only communities but individual companies. Yeah. So I just want to thank you for driving the bus and being on the show.
Thank you, and I appreciate your partnership as well. It's been a great run with our two companies together. So thank you.
That it has.
Thanks.